Chapter 251. The Zippels' objective was to kill Bamel to regain the clan's dignity. Their reputation had hit rock bottom. Too many of their atrocities had been exposed to the world by Vamel. And if they couldn't eliminate Vamel, the dignity of the world's most powerful clan would plummet once again. Of course, if Jean decided not to reveal himself, the Zippels would simply downplay it using Karl's death as an excuse. They will soon appoint me as a full-fledged flag-bearer, and I'll just have to live hidden until then. Plus, I'll always have a safe place to hide. Jean shrugged as he spoke to Kashmir. But that patriarch of the Zippel clan, isn't he too harsh on his own son? He not only sent him to die under false accusations but even had his own son killed just to lure you in. What happened to family love? It almost makes me think the victim was a double created by Bouvard Gaston. He was probably the real Karl, Sir Kashmir. If it was a double, it would put the Kinslow in danger if it ever revealed during an interrogation. They have no reason to risk themselves for the Zippels. They are now hostile towards each other. The ruthless and dirty pinnacle of magic. That was Jin's definition of Kiliak Zippel. However, the negative connotations did not diminish the fact that he was still at the pinnacle. He was an enemy Jin couldn't face at the moment. Even Siren was cautious of him. The idea of his identity being revealed to Kiliak sent shivers down Jin's spine. He would never have revealed his identity if the Zippels had undermined any land other than the sacred kingdom of Vankila, because he would be captured by Kiliak and beheaded before reaching a safe zone. At the same time, it was something to look forward to. If the reserve flag-bearer of the Runcandles won by decision against Kiliak Zippel in their first battle, the whole world would be shaken. The Zippels made no statements regarding the Holy Kingdom after Karl's death. Lonnie, the loyal officers, and her people could do nothing to punish the clan, although they obviously knew the Zippels had undermined the kingdom. Their quest for the truth was constantly delayed, and the fervent interest of foreign media began to slowly fade. On the other hand, media outlets based in the Lutero Magical Federation published article after article supporting the Zippels' point of view. Of course, Huffaster writers responded with criticism of the Zippel clan, but they didn't do much new harm. Setting aside the Holy Kingdom, clashes in columns and opinion pieces were part of their daily routine, and both clans always considered each other bastards. The fury of outsiders quickly subsided. Nobles from visiting nations no longer came to the plaza where Lonnie and the sacred subjects of the kingdom gathered after realizing it wouldn't be prudent to side against the Zippels. The way the Zippels pretended to pay a false price by killing Karl Zippel was certainly unreasonable. But major factions like the Zippels could always make situations even more unreasonable. If they really put their minds to it, they could always dismiss the protests of weak victims and even bring down third parties involved. The press and neutral organizations understood this very well. They had to watch how the Zippels received their actions. Of course, the third parties also had other benefits in mind. The incident in the Holy Kingdom would be remembered as a major blunder in the Zippel clan's history, but every major power always had some kind of flaw. Once the tempers cooled, the Zippels would use their wealth and manpower to line the pockets and sweeten the mouths of neutral forces. Turn a blind eye, then we'll make it worth your while. That's how the Zippels consoled neutral factions with each incident. On the other hand, the Runcandles always clung to their rule of fear. The two clans had very different ideologies that affected their way of governing the world. And clearly, the Zippels' way was more likely to be effective in dealing with the incident in the Holy Kingdom. Zippel ships entered the territorial waters of the Holy Kingdom, and each one was filled with gold to the brim. This was the compensation the Zippels rewarded for the political interference carried out by Karl Zippel's followers, regardless of his death. The amount of compensation was unimaginable. The Holy Kingdom could easily fund the national budget for the next 30 years with the gold, should they accept the compensation. Lonnie rejected the offer, of course, and the loyal forces of the kingdom were infuriated by the Zippels' maneuver. Those bastards. Don't they have any consideration for the Holy Kingdom? No. Do they have any consideration for others? Even the common people expressed their anger towards the clan. The Zippels ignored them and simply unloaded the gold at the harbor. They seemed to not care who took it, and in fact they were inciting people to covet it and steal it. As proof of their intentions, no one was assigned to guard the abandoned gold chests at the harbor. Gold ingots piled up in the middle of the harbor, shining like a castle made of wealth. Neither the common folk nor the kings had ever seen so much gold in their treasuries. The massive pile of riches not only incited greed but was also intimidating. The Zippels would never retrieve the gold even if the Holy Kingdom didn't accept it. They're showing off, all right? Jean inspected the pile of gold with his arms crossed. He could see what would happen to the Holy Kingdom if they didn't accept the wealth. Not even in the dens of gold-crazed dragons is there this much gold. Wow. How many limited edition Eki illustration books do you think could be bought with that? Murakan joked. You're crazy. What did you just say? Eki books? How do you come up with these things? It just came to me, I guess. Jean shook his head. That gold is enough to cover the Holy Kingdom's annual budget for 30 years. Or even 50 if spent wisely. That seems right. If they reject the gold, the Zippels will starve them for the next 50 years. If the Holy Kingdom accepted the gold, willingly covered up the incident, and turned a blind eye to the truth just this once, then the Zippels would bring prosperity to the Holy Kingdom. If not, they would cut off all sources of income for the kingdom. That's what the gold at the harbor meant. If the Holy Kingdom abandons its ego and vengeance, the Zippels will promise them a prosperous life. But if they cling to their customs, the gold will be handed to other neutral factions. If that happens, the Zippels will make the Holy Kingdom regret not accepting the offer by interfering with trade. For now, the people of the Holy Kingdom had an absolute disdain for the Zippels. But how long would that last? Most common people didn't have unwavering faith like Lonnie and the loyal aides of Vitura. The life of a commoner was nothing more than a series of days spent surviving and striving for their own happiness as a result of their work. But once the nation became impoverished, individuals would end up poor as well. Their compensation for work would decrease, while the intensity of work would only increase. And if their lives didn't improve under such circumstances, would the holy subjects of the kingdom continue to defend the choice that Lonnie and her loyal leaders made today? They wouldn't. They would hold the kingdom's leaders responsible for the deterioration of their quality of life, not the Zippels who imposed tremendous economic sanctions on the kingdom in the first place. And the Zippels wouldn't stop politically shaking them to expedite the process. Lonnie and her aides would struggle to find solutions and end up being remembered as tyrants or incompetent leaders. I didn't want to think about all those bothersome circumstances, and that's why I thought about nude portraits. Oh, sure. Of course, they still had the Runcandle clan. The Runcandles would certainly do something if the Holy Kingdom encountered such turmoil. But would they splurge as much money as the Zippels to stabilize the Holy Kingdom? Not only that, they lacked justification. Many lands in Huffister were grappling with poverty. The Runcandles couldn't afford to prioritize the Holy Kingdom over their own, as it could cause divisions within the faction. In the end, the Runcandles would lose if the battle was fought in finances. Let's put an end to this crap. On December 24, 1797, Lonnie decided to initiate the requiem for the Holy King and the victims of the biological golem experiments. The trials had not yet concluded, but they couldn't delay the requiem any longer. The saints tried to maintain the integrity of the deceased false Holy King's body with their sacred powers, but it was starting to decompose. Vitura's body, which had been hung as a warning, had already rotted away. Furthermore, they had to finish the requiem before the neutral press abandoned the kingdom. And the fact that the trials for the murder of the Holy King had not yet concluded provided an extra layer of protection for Jean. The requiem was scheduled to last 3 hours. As usual, Lonnie recited the prayer for the departed souls. "Please be seated," Lonnie said as she ascended the podium. She spoke softly, but everyone present knelt down and closed their eyes. "Dear Ayula, your most humble daughter, Lonnie Salome, stands here today for the evils of the late Holy King Miklin and your holy subjects. Please answer my prayer, so that we may commemorate their final moment on earth with your voice." The requiems of the Holy Kingdom were often referred to as the Milky Way prayer by the narrators. The prayer gathered the sacred powers of all participants in the requiem into a single combined energy, allowing the prayer to resonate and emit the characteristic yellow sacred light in all participants, including those without sacred powers. The amount of light emitted by the participants was determined by the sanctity of the person leading the prayer. That's why Jean and Murakan were completely impressed. Lani Salome. He knew she had a considerable amount of sacred energy when she managed to protect Murakan from those toxic vapors, but the entire plaza was glowing yellow. Lani's body trembled as she recited the prayer. She infused her sacred energy into the bodies of the several thousand holy subjects gathered in the plaza. It was exactly as the narrators had described it, as if the Milky Way flowed here on Earth. The journalists thought it would be the last major scoop they would get from the Holy Kingdom. It was the largest requiem the kingdom had seen in many years. Therefore, I pray that Ayula's children may return to your embrace. I pray that our light reaches you and blesses their eternal lives. After finishing the prayer, Lani stumbled and clung to the lectern. It was a perfect requiem. But no one noticed that Lani's requiem went beyond perfection and was, in fact, a miracle. It restored Vitura's body, which had been completely rotten and now buried underground, to its original state. Not even Lani was aware of this fact. It was a secret known only to Ayula and the soul of the deceased Vitura. Lani took several deep breaths. After catching her breath, Lani looked at the crowd. The requiem has ended. But today, I, Lani Salome, would like to introduce a man who has made a great sacrifice for the Holy Kingdom despite being an outsider. The crowd looked around as Jean approached slowly. He took off the hood covering his head, revealing his blonde-dyed hair. Jean spoke without hesitation. I am Jean Runcandle. Chapter 252. No one expected his name. When the elegant blonde hair was uncovered beneath the hood and the layers of decadent makeup were revealed, everyone thought that Bamel would finally show up. But Jean Runcandle? The entire plaza fell silent. People questioned their own ears as they waited for Jean to continue. Jean Runcandle? Wasn't it supposed to be Bamel, not Jean Runcandle? The reserve flag-bearer of the Runcandles? The journalists were dumbfounded. They exchanged bewildered looks among themselves. On the other hand, the Runcandle delegation, paying their respects in a corner of the plaza, couldn't believe their eyes. Jean, that crazy rascal. He could have given me a heads up. Did he expect me to follow along by myself? Not even Luna had any idea. But she thought that he must have some solid plan in mind if he decided to cause such trouble. She was about to curse out loud but didn't forget her promise to become a sword for Jean. Her most reliable sword, one that he could wield at will whenever and wherever. That was the role she had accepted to play. Therefore, she calmed herself and decided to read Jin's moves and react accordingly. Joshua, standing next to Luna, looked at Jean with his face completely red with anger. Jean, you bastard. You just had to create more problems. Joshua thought that revealing Jin's identity at that moment was literally a suicidal act. The Zippels had given up a lot for Bamel's death. They had discarded their dignity and reputation, resorting even to a false killer for their cause. They were determined to kill him no matter the cost. They had already suffered too much harm to let him be. Joshua clenched his teeth. Veins bulged on his neck. He could understand why that damn brother of his revealed himself at that precise moment. You seem so sure that I won't let you die, even if it goes against the clan's laws, just because of that contract of yours, the power of shadows, the same power that Joshua coveted. If Jean died, Joshua would never be able to steal the Soderet's contract for himself. Therefore, Joshua thought that Jean intended to involve him by endangering his own life. There was nothing that could be done to prevent other people from recognizing Runcandle's reserve flag-bearers, but reserve flag-bearers were strictly prohibited from revealing their own identities. The same rule applied to everyone in the Sword Garden. They were not allowed to assist the reserve flag-bearers. The clan clearly warned against using the clan Runcandle's reputation to make a name for oneself. It was a well-known rule, even to outsiders of the clan. But what would happen if a reserve flag-bearer and a flag-bearer broke this rule with so many eyes watching? The strict interpretation of the rule would clearly demand the death or excommunication of both. But this particular flag-bearer was Joshua, known to be the patriarchal successor. It's unlikely that Mother would punish me severely, and if they don't punish me for it, that cunning boy must know that he won't be punished either. The Black Panther, Rosa Runcandle, would resort to any means to protect Joshua. And even Rosa herself couldn't find justification to punish Jean without also punishing Joshua. Joshua felt extremely frustrated. He could clearly see Jin's plan, but he knew he had to play along. I may accept your tricks for now, but I won't let you fool us all the time. Joshua thought it over and calmed himself. Guardian Knights, prepare for combat. Joshua whispered his order to the knights. Standing behind him, his intention was to protect Jean if the Zippels launched an attack. Loyalty to the clan. Loyalty to the clan. The Guardian Knights whispered their acknowledgement courteously and sharpened their senses. Jean then glanced at Joshua, who was obviously doing his best to hide his anger. Joshua's and Jin's eyes met for a moment. Jean flashed a smile and thought to himself, "You're trying to keep a straight face, Joshua, but I can see through you. You must be very frustrated after realizing that you have no choice but to help me. You're not my rival." Jean maintained his smile and continued speaking to the crowd. "As you all know, I am the reserve flag-bearer of the Runcandle clan. I began my training as a reserve flag-bearer in 1795 and have since used various false names. Today, I stand before you as Bamel, one of my false identities. Are you really Jean Runcandle? We were told that Jean Runcandle has black eyes and jet black hair." A journalist shouted. Then Jean took out a handkerchief from his inner pockets and wiped his face and hair. Each stroke of the handkerchief erased his makeup and hair dye. The blonde hair returned to its original black color. Bamel was clearly depicted with elegant blonde hair and a pretty boy face, but not much was known about Jean Runcandle's appearance, even after the enemy's celebrations. However, everyone knew that the youngest son of the Runcandles had black eyes and jet black hair. People were left dumbfounded. But some recognized him. "It's Jean Grey. Oh, look at that. It's the champion of the Cosmos Arena, Jean Grey," shouted some of the nobles from Bellard who had come to pay their respects. In particular, the excited one had made a lot of money thanks to Jean back then. "I'm sure of it. It's that young man we saw then in the Kingdom of Middle." Likewise, the mercenary delegation visiting the Holy Kingdom, the Black Kings, also recognized him. "I knew Lord Jean would become the sensation of the world someday. He was also quite a spectacle at the enemy's celebration." Kuhaha! Johnsina Farrell of the Dragon King's Knights laughed out loud upon recognizing Jean. All the knights from the other clans who had been present at the enemy's celebration and had come to pay their respects to the Holy Kingdom reacted similarly. Joining the Requiem was the final rite to pay respects to the Holy King, and thus, delegations from all nations were present in the plaza. When the nobles of Bellard shouted Jean Grey's name, the journalists remembered another incident. Kiddard Hall. They recalled that mysterious swordsman who left Jean Grey's name at the crime scene. All the journalists felt that their instincts were telling them that this would be the biggest scoop of their lives. Much bigger than the assassination of the Holy King or the political interference of the Zippel clan. They had to ask questions right away. The journalists thought that Jean could drop dead at any moment. The Zippel magicians would soon burst into the plaza to hunt him down. Would the Runcandles and the Huffaster Knights then help Jean? The journalists didn't believe so. "Lord Jean, were you also the one who killed Kiddard Hall? What is the reason for risking your safety now by revealing your identity? Aren't you afraid of the Zippel? Please tell us the reason you helped the Holy Kingdom as a reserve flag-bearer. Did you receive orders from the Runcandle clan? Tell us about your relationship with Lady Lonnie of the Holy Kingdom." All the journalists began shouting at once. Although the Runcandle and Huffaster Knights glared at them, they felt they would never have another chance to ask Jean questions. The plaza would instantly descend into chaos as soon as the Zippel magicians arrived. Therefore, they had to secure their answers quickly and flee from that place. Jean was disappointed when he saw the journalists shouting like possessed maniacs. He always knew journalists were exaggerating, but he didn't expect them to forget their manners in this place of mourning. "Silence, all of you. I won't entertain questions," Jean shouted forcefully. The journalists immediately trembled and stopped shouting. I'm not here to feed your curiosities. Any journalist who dares to speak without my permission will never hold a pen again. There was a dangerous gleam in Jin's eyes. He intended to follow through on what he had said. The journalists fell silent. Jin composed himself and spoke again. As a reserve flag-bearer, I traveled to many lands to earn benefits and reputation in preparation to become a flag-bearer. It was then that I witnessed the biological experiments carried out by the Zippels in Kalin and learned that a terrorist group called the Kinzalo was also involved in the experiments. The journalists hurriedly wrote to transcribe his speech word for word. I didn't know that the Holy Kingdom had fallen into the hands of the Zippels and the Kinzalo, but it seems I caused both sides to break their alliance. As a result, the factions were constantly fighting in the underworld of the Holy Kingdom, and I felt somewhat responsible for the events. Lani looked somber as she listened to Jin's practical speech. I also saw it as an opportunity. As a reserve flag-bearer, what greater achievement can I carve for myself than exposing the corruption of a nation and, in the process, sticking it to the rival Runcandle clan? They had already agreed on this speech. It was intended to give the impression that Jin was helping the Holy Kingdom for personal glory, not as a means to repay Lani's favor. They had already agreed on this speech. It was intended to give the impression that Jin was helping the Holy Kingdom for personal glory, not as a means to repay Lani's favor. Therefore, I went to the lands of the Kinzalo to rescue the people of the Holy Kingdom and handed them over to Lady Lani. The only promise I obtained from Lady Lani was that she would testify to my accomplishments to my clan in the future. But the Zippels had to stand in my way. I haven't killed Karl Zippel. Killing him would only be a loss for me. Jin shrugged as he spoke, leaving many dumbfounded. Therefore, I have come before you today to prevent my false name of Bamel from being labeled as Karl Zippel's killer. Furthermore, the achievement of bringing to light the atrocities of the Zippels and the Kinzalo is mine, not my clan's. I hope you all remember this fact, because... Jin pointed to a corner of the plaza with his finger. Now they will try to finish me off. I will see you all alive. Goodbye. The Zippel magicians in their robes were in their positions. They had just finished casting and aiming offensive spells. Guardian Knights, protect the reserve flag-bearer. Joshua was about to shout his order, but Luna was the first to raise her voice. Guardian Knights of the Runcandle clan and all Huffister Knights, protect the civilians. I myself will decapitate anyone who aids the reserve flag-bearer. Jin smiled upon hearing Luna's order. He understood perfectly what she wanted. Swoosh! 5 mana bolts flew toward Jin. Jin easily deflected them and leaped off the podium. Chapter 253. Sigmund pierced through the mana bolt and sent splinters flying. The crowd in the plaza screamed at the sudden assault. The Golden Shield Holy Knights leaped onto the podium. Protect Lady Lani. Everyone, get down. Don't get caught in the crossfire. The Golden Shield Holy Knights shouted to the civilians after securing Lani. Most of the crowd followed the orders and dropped to the ground. But not everyone heeded the advice. A good number of them panicked and became exposed to the attacks of the Zippel magicians. All the magicians launching attacks at Jin were at least 7-star or higher. A mere touch of their spells could cause serious injuries or death to civilians. But the magicians continued casting spells, as if they didn't care whether the civilians lived or died. In fact, they wouldn't stop until Jin was dead, regardless of how many civilians perished in the process. The Zippels no longer clung to their symbol of justice. If they failed to kill Bamel, who was actually Jin Runcandle, they would be despised from this day forward. No, it was much graver than that. Losing Bamel here today essentially meant the entire Zippel clan was playing with the individual activity of a single Runcandle reserve flag-bearer. They had to prevent it at all costs. We must finish off Jin Runcandle before he leaves the plaza. Trap him and push him toward the center. The magicians were desperate. They knew better than anyone that the clan wouldn't spare their lives if they lost Jin now, regardless of their reasons. Jin calmly assessed the magicians' locations. 4 on the left, 6 in the center. 10 for now. They were all that remained in the plaza. But there would be several dozen pursuing Jin outside the plaza. The 6 are weaker than the 4. He had to break their formation and leave the plaza. If their reinforcements started arriving, he would be trapped within the plaza, and Jean didn't want innocent civilians getting caught up in the fight and dying. Of course, he always kept in mind the possibility of civilian casualties when he thought about revealing his identity. But it was the best he could do. He had to reveal his identity when there were neutral journalists, third parties, witnesses, and all the help he could gather in order to stick it to the Zippels. Lonnie had also made an urgent request to him. She told him that civilian casualties would only be the result of her own request for him to reveal himself in the plaza, that if anyone was to blame, it would be her. Jean wasn't comfortable risking the lives of civilians, but he didn't reject her. He knew he could trust Luna. He feared that some of the innocent civilians might get hurt or killed. Jean glanced toward Luna. But it seems that won't happen today. Luna is truly impressive. The Runcandle Guardian Knights and the Huffister martial artists wielded their weapons under Luna's orders. They achieved the magnificent feat of blocking each and every attack from the magicians aimed at the civilians. Despite being a delegation sent to pay respects to the dead, these Guardian Knights were here to assist the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd flag-bearers of the clan. Each one of them was almost as strong as an execution knight, and most of the Huffister martial artists were composed of the top talents from each clan. The honor of the Runcandle clan and Huffister will hit rock bottom if a single innocent soul dies today in the Holy Kingdom. Block them and disperse. There will be a battle outside the plaza too. Loyalty to the clan. The Guardian Knights and Huffister martial artists desperately protected the people of the Holy Kingdom as if they were their own. To them, being able to carry out a mission with Luna was a greater honor than anything else. She was the solitary white whale, the greatest legend after Siren and admired by all Huffister martial artists. It was unknown whether they would ever wield a sword alongside Luna again in their lifetime. Therefore, they couldn't afford to disappoint Luna in her moment of glory. Meanwhile, this is what Luna thought. Jean, you seem pleased. It seems I read your thoughts correctly. The fact that she was executing her first task as Jin's sword made her heart beat faster. Now, she couldn't imagine anyone else leading the Runcandle clan after Siren than her younger brother, Jean Runcandle. Schluck. Ching. Despite the countless number of spells being launched, only those remaining flew toward Jean, as if they had been filtered. The civilians began orderly leaving the plaza under Luna's protection. Some of the journalists risked their lives and positioned themselves behind the Guardian Knights to record the incident. In their notes, "First flag-bearer, we don't have time for this." Joshua approached Luna. "What's the matter? Don't you think we should save the reserve flag-bearer? Even if he broke the clan's rule, what will become of our reputation if our reserve flag-bearer dies at the hands of the Zippels? Second flag-bearer, what does the death of a reserve flag-bearer have to do with the reputation of the Runcandles? The flag-bearer himself must bear the weight of his actions. Our relationship with the Holy Kingdom takes priority over his safety. Then don't you think we should be the ones to punish the reserve flag-bearer ourselves? That should be a higher priority than protecting civilians. Please choose wisely." Immediately, Luna's eyes gleamed dangerously. "Your Black Knights aren't here now. How dare you defy me? Step up your game if you don't want to be humiliated in front of everyone." Joshua's face instantly paled. It was as Luna said. His Black Knights weren't here, but he had secretly brought execution knights with him. They were disguised and hidden at various points in the plaza. Therefore, he could afford to go against Luna's orders. Those knights would always prioritize his orders, regardless of what Luna had commanded. In that case, it would be Luna who would be humiliated, not himself. But Joshua decided not to rebel against Luna. "I shouldn't let my momentary embarrassment undermine the reputation of the Runcandle clan, as it will soon be mine. Besides, if I go against Luna right now, I'll lose the trust of the other martial arts clans. Rank wars should stay within the clan. Challenging Luna's authority on a public occasion like this would only undermine the dignity of the Runcandle clan." Luna's selfishness frustrated him greatly, but it wasn't the time to act like a fool. "Understood," Joshua replied bluntly. He had acted preemptively out of fear that Jean would die and prevent him from securing the Soderette contract. But when he turned to look, none of that seemed likely. A blue electric bolt descended from the clear sky. It was the lightning bolt of the Sword of Legends. The same power that had caused the world to mistake Bamel for the Paytel contractor. The 6 magicians guarding the center of the plaza couldn't react to the bolt and fell to the ground from the attack. That must be the energy of legends. Showed great skill against me on the Bluebird Islands even without using that power. It will be difficult for them to catch him unless the Tower Masters arrive to create formations to trap him. He couldn't understand why the heavens favored Jean when the prophecy had chosen him, Joshua Runcandle. Flash, crack. Each lightning drop caused square ground blocks to jump, sending rocks and magicians flying. Now that Jean could see Luna perfectly guarding the civilians, he had no reason to hold back. Only an instant passed before the 6 magicians lost their lives. This is what I like about the Sword of Legends. Unless one is truly gifted, they won't escape its initial burst. Of course, the 6 magicians in the center were worthy of being called geniuses elsewhere. Otherwise, they wouldn't have made the cut to join the Zippel clan. But from Jin's perspective, they were nothing more than mediocre talents. Compared to the powerful opponents he had constantly fought against, they were mere minor subordinates. Respond with caution. Consider him a lightning-based mage. Place spells around the area, so he can't get close. The 4 magicians on the left had considerable talent, even by Jin's standards. They properly blocked the advance of the lightning by casting shield barriers and approached Jean. They even modified various ice-based spells to dazzle Jin's vision. Ice pillars surrounded Jean, making it difficult for him to aim the lightning. He could always cut through all the ice pillars with blade waves since the Huffister Knights would protect the civilians. But he didn't need to waste more time in the plaza now that he had eliminated the center forces. Shuri. Jean took the red ruby out of his inner pocket. The red ruby emitted light and released Shuri from within. What's that supposed to be? A cat. Even the expert magicians took a step back, surprised. Anyone would react that way if they encountered a cat larger than a horse-drawn carriage for the first time in their lives. The fact that the giant cat shot mana lightning from its eyes didn't improve the situation for them. Shuri leaped and screeched while firing lightning bolts at the magicians. Jean leaped onto the ice pillars created by the magicians to jump onto Shuri. Jean climbed onto Shuri's back. Meanwhile, the magicians desperately tried to protect themselves from Shuri's lightning bolts. Shuri landed softly on the ground and screeched again. Then, the civilians still standing and the desperate witnessing journalists all fell to the ground. Their legs couldn't withstand the ferocity of Shuri's screech. The sound was controlled in a way that only trained martial artists would be able to endure. Is that really the power of a Runcandle Reserve flag-bearer? Everyone thought the same, from the Huffister martial artists, the civilians who were now all on the ground, and even the surviving Zippel magicians. It was a scene straight out of a fairy tale, only it was unfolding before their own eyes. There was plenty of maneuvering space once all the civilians fell to the ground. Shuri pounced lightly and began running toward the open path. It moved extremely fast, but not a single civilian was harmed by Shuri's steps. Maya! Shuri asked which way to run. Jean pointed toward the portal gate. He wanted to head to the port, where there were mountains of Zippel gold. Jin's ultimate goal was to melt all the gold and throw it into the sea before escaping. It didn't take long to reach the portal gate. The Zippel magicians outside the plaza couldn't catch up to Shuri. Loyal. Officials of the Holy Kingdom awaited Jean and Shuri at the gate and opened access for them when they arrived. Thank you, Lord Jean. I wish you luck. I also wish you luck. When Jean arrived at the port, he encountered the last person he expected to see. Jean? Look, it's Jean. The white-haired teenager's eyes widened in surprise upon recognizing Jean. It was Baradin Zippel, the successor to the Zippel clan patriarchate. It seemed that he had just arrived at the port as well. But behind Baradin, something was burning wildly. They had set fire to the gold. Chapter 254. Baradin. Jean had his eyes just as wide with surprise as he dismounted Shuri. What is this idiot doing here? And what's with the gold on fire? The flames over the gold were massive and worthy of being called a conflagration. Since the amount of gold was enough for the entire Holy Kingdom for decades, The fire engulfing it was equally grand. Is this your doing? Jean was about to ask Baradin this when he heard another familiar voice. Baradin, the fire has broken out even at the back. We should escape now and… Huh? Jean? Is it really you? A small physique and a husky voice. Dante ran. He had been checking if all the gold was completely aflame, which is why Jean didn't notice him at first. Dante? You too. Even Jean had to stammer as Dante joined them. How is it possible that these idiots always show up in the most unexpected places? Whenever they met, it was like this. When Jean left the Storm Castle in the Cosmic Arena in the city of the anonymous Samuel, and even now, Jean composed himself and inspected the two. His eyes sparkled with joy and happiness. To think we would meet here of all places. There must be something that truly connects us, dear friends. Yes, that's true. Haha he hoo hoo. Last time, you guys were wreaking havoc in Samuel, but it seems this time it's us causing trouble. By the way, what's that cat? It's huge. Look at that. You're riding a ruby cat. How did you come across this spirit beast? Well, anyway, I'm really glad to see you. Ha ha ha. Dante and Baradin spoke, both pointing at Shuri. Jean felt a headache coming on as he saw those perfectly happy fools in front of a burning pile of gold. Weren't you talking about an escape? Did you guys set the fire? To be precise, it was Baradin. Dante pointed his finger at Baradin like a child tattling on a friend after being caught misbehaving. No, it was you who did it, remember? Baradin quickly denied but was actually pointing at Jean, not Dante. Jean widened his eyes and pointed at himself incredulously. What? Me? When did I do that? Baradin, this guy just arrived. The fire was undoubtedly your… Well, let's say it was Jean. He is a reserve flag-bearer of Runcandle, so I might as well count it as one of his achievements. Dante was waving his hand to scold Baradin, but a gold ingot suddenly fell out of his pocket and dropped to the ground. Jean abruptly stopped and glanced from the gold ingot on the floor to Dante's face. Guys, come on. This is insane. Don't tell me you just looted a bar. It's a misunderstanding. Baradin told me he would give me some money if I helped him. That's why I followed him here. Dante, did you really steal a gold ingot behind my back? Baradin reprimanded him. Dante's eyes widened so much in surprise they were almost popping out. Baradin, why do you keep changing your words? You set the fire. Don't you remember? Baradin quickly shook his head. But he was actually pointing at Jean, not Dante. Jean slapped his forehead and took a deep breath. Yes, it was impossible for that honest guy Dante to stoop so low as to steal a gold ingot. However, Baradin seemed to be acting quite strangely. His eyes were also quite dazed. Baradin was sweating profusely and desperately looking around. Dante grabbed Baradin by the collar and shouted, accusing him of being a thief. Oh well, it doesn't matter. I don't know anymore. What I do know is that we have to blame Jean for this. If we don't, both of us will be in trouble, Dante. You didn't say anything about that until we got here. I briefly lost my mind due to my anger. You briefly lost your mind? We were together on that ship for 3 days until we got here. You were perfectly fine the whole time. Are you telling me you were faking that determination when you said you couldn't forgive the atrocities of your clan? Urgerfaf. Baradin writhed like a broken wind-up toy. Baradin, just shut up for a moment. Dante, tell me what's going on. We don't have much time. The Zippel magicians pursuing my life will arrive soon. Jean, what do you mean by that, my friend? I was the one who exposed the incidents in the Holy Kingdom. I just revealed it in the Capitol Plaza, and am now fleeing after fighting against the Zippel magicians who opened fire on me. What? Does this mean you're Bamel? Are you Bamel? Dante and Baradin brought their faces closer to Jean. The three of them were in a state of shock. Jean could barely keep himself sane. If he also joined in this foolish charade, the situation could become infinitely more absurd. Besides that, I even revealed the fact that I'm the reserve flag-bearer of the Runcandle clan, so the Zippel have no choice but to kill me right away. The reason I chose to escape this way was to get rid of the gold that the Zippel provided me with feigned goodwill. Jean, we are truly meant to be friends. Dante clenched his fists, his face overwhelmed with emotions. Our intention is the same, Jean. Baradin seems to be out of it right now, but he asked for my help after telling me he couldn't forgive his own clan. He wanted to take responsibility as the successor of the Zippel Patriarchate. In other words, the three of them were at the port for the same purpose. Baradin and Dante were furious after reading about the situation in the Holy Kingdom. Baradin, in particular, decided to correct the wrongs, even if it was his own clan that was responsible for the incident. As pure-blooded members of important clans, Jean and Dante knew how difficult it was to make that decision. Setting aside Baradin's request, it was this understanding that made Dante, the successor of the Hiran Patriarchate, assist Baradin. Dante was moved by his determination. Of course, now he was less impressed after seeing Baradin spout nonsense while carrying out the act. That's why you can blame me for the fire. It doesn't matter. If you hadn't set it on fire, I would have done it myself. Jean. Baradin composed himself and looked Jean in the eyes. You said my magicians attacked you? To hide the truth and protect the dignity of the clan. Jean didn't respond but nodded. Baradin's face darkened. And not only that, they are pursuing you right now? Yes. Those bastards. Don't they have any shame? I'll kill every single one of them myself. Baradin's hair stood on end as if blown by the wind. His mana was increasing. He was an 8-star or maybe even stronger. Jean gasped as he felt Baradin's mana. How did he become so strong? It was said that he reached 9 stars at 30 years old in my past life. Jean thought Baradin's powers were of 7 stars. Since Baradin was capable of extremely fast, simultaneous spellcasting, he was stronger than 8-star magicians at his 7 stars. But he was mistaken. The mana that started rising in Baradin was close to a 9-star level, even at a glance. Calm down, Baradin. Clan's dignity? Who cares about that? How many innocent lives must be taken to protect something like that? Jean suddenly remembered the first day he met Baradin. Well, it's not bad. Impressive. But let me give you some advice as someone who's a few years ahead of you in this line of work. If you encounter another Zippel who offends you, try not to rush and cut off their fingers. Don't you think that would create a lot of trouble for our 2 clans? Baradin had said. You're quite the jester too, Baradin Zippel. What makes you say that? If my clan and yours went into a bloodbath over every little dispute, the whole world would already be demolished. I gave you that advice so you would consider the suffering of the citizens in war. That had been the conversation with Baradin at the Middle Kingdom's portal when he nearly cut off Baradin's finger. Jean always thought Baradin was the mischievous type and was so sure he would be well aware of the Zippel clan's illicit activities. But right now, Baradin didn't seem aware of the atrocities committed by the Zippel clan at all. Sure, Baradin was quite odd and eccentric, but maybe he wasn't the type of Zippel that Jean had always believed him to be. Do you know the meaning of this gold, Jean? Basically, my clan threatens to plunge the Holy Kingdom into poverty for several decades if they don't accept this gold and turn a blind eye to the incident. Essentially, that means we will starve over 1 million civilians. Baradin regained the determination that had once moved Dante. Jean understood why Baradin swung from one extreme to another. He must be scared. He was furious at the atrocities of his own clan, but on the other hand, he was also terribly scared of the events that would follow his actions. But when he learned that Jean had been attacked by the Zippel magicians, his anger triumphed over his fears. The fact that Jean was attacked left nothing but anger in his mind. All other emotions and reason dissipated. Things would have been very different if Jeremias had made the same decision in similar circumstances. The Run Candles wouldn't care about the reason. They would incapacitate him and excommunicate him from the clan. They would never tolerate a mere son of the clan sabotaging the efforts of the whole clan to safeguard their dignity, especially if it was for a petty sense of justice. I realized that too. That's why I tried to destroy the gold even after my identity was revealed. Then how do you expect me to calm down? It's different when I do it and when you do it. All I have to do is give the Holy Kingdom a reason to reject the gold and flee, because I'm just the third party involved. And you? What are you going to do after staining your hands with the blood of those magicians? My father will understand my intent. It's not pleasant for me to say this, but look at your brother. Even Karl Zippel was killed by an assassin sent by your father. Karl, the master of the fourth tower, was used as bait to lure me, understand? Do you think you could? Fire. The gold is burning. It must be him who set it on fire. Catch him. You must not fail. They heard shouts from afar. The magicians pursuing Jean had just arrived at the port. Wait, Jean, Dante, you go ahead. I'll be the one to stop them. Baradin spoke quietly. The mana in his hands ignited a different kind of fire, the first version of the flame-wrought decimator orb. This time, the spell worked, unlike the previous time in Samuel. Baradin, my friend. It's been fun, guys. Jean let out a sigh. Has puberty come late for him? I understand how he feels, but this is too reckless, angry or not. What does he think he is? A moth to a flame. Jean can think of 1,000 better and more efficient ways to resolve this situation. Well, we'll go ahead, Baradin. But Jean, if we escape alone, what will happen to Baradin? Dante turned his head and shouted. But in return, let's say you were horribly defeated while trying to stop me. Bam! Jin's right fist landed squarely on Baradin's chin. Uff! Crack! Jean followed up with a front kick to the solar plexus. Baradin fell forward, blood gushing from his mouth. When Baradin fell to the ground, Jean even stepped on the back of his neck to bury his face completely in the ground. The sudden ambush even caused a mana reflux in Baradin. They could hear Baradin gurgling blood. Jean, you don't want him to be punished in his clan either, right? The same goes for you. Come here. Jean wrapped Dante in his cloak as if it were a gift box. It might hurt a bit, but keep your mouth shut until I give the signal, all right? Shuri, bite him. Jean climbed onto Shuri's back, and the cat shoved Dante into its mouth. Chapter 255. Jean was only able to wrap Dante because he was small enough. If he had been as big as a normal man, he would never have managed to hide his shoe inside the cloak. Was that a piercing sound? I must be mistaken, right? Even if he heard it correctly, he couldn't afford to let Dante out now. Jean looked at Baradin, who was on the ground. He was convulsing and seemed like he would faint very soon. The best way to break through a barricade of Zippel magicians was to keep Baradin as a hostage. But waving Baradin as a flag to drive away, the magicians would leave an official record of defeat against him because countless journalists would come to witness the event. If anyone had to find out, ideally, the fact that Baradin was knocked unconscious should be confidential information known only to the Zippels as much as possible. He won't cause trouble in his clan after regaining consciousness, right? And here I was thinking that Dante was the only one who would die for his beliefs. There was a good reason why the two were so close. Dante and Baradin were two reckless types, who would risk their lives for their beliefs rather than for efficient exits. The fire grew stronger as it melted the gold. The molten gold alloy flowed in the opposite direction from Baradin, toward the sea. It's him. We've located Jean Runcandle. The magicians immediately turned their eyes to Jean. But unlike their hurried voices, they were not panicked as they had been in the plaza. They were forming formations. Some cast shield barriers over themselves to defend against his Sword of Legends, while others prepared effective combinations of offensive spells. There were 20 Zippel magicians behind Jean, but he didn't feel tense at all. Since he had just revealed his identity as a Runcandle and his fake name Vamel in the plaza, there was no need to hide that he was a swordsman anymore. Of course, the Zippels could always press charges against the Runcandles for breaking the pact. But this was what Jean thought about it. That's my clan's problem, not mine. If he thought the Runcandles weren't powerful enough to handle such a problem, he wouldn't have revealed his identity. No, in fact, he wouldn't have wished to become their next patriarch upon his return to life. Mana gathered in Jin's palm. The Zippel magicians clearly saw as the dispersed mana in the air instantly condensed into concentrated mana in Jin's hand. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. Mana? Did he just gather that much mana? The captain of the magicians trembled as he spoke. There was a reason for their surprise. Jean wasn't just gathering mana. He was casting spells at an alarming speed, even for those magicians who were constantly praised as prodigies before joining the Zippels. In fact, Jin's mana was much more concentrated than the mana accumulated by the Zippel magicians. They thought only pure-blooded Zippels were capable of handling such mana. But to think a run candle could do it, and furthermore a young provisional flag-bearer. "Open fire!" the captain of the magicians angrily shouted. That damn run candle was plotting something, and he felt insulted. The idea of a run candle wielding magic superior to theirs was horrifying to imagine. Upon hearing his order, the magicians unleashed multiple lightning bolts from their pentagrams. Shuri's eyes gleamed as the giant cat twisted to dodge the attacks. Shuri leaped left and right to evade the mana bolts and slashed the inevitable ones with its claws. The magicians calmly continued with their next move, as if they had foreseen it. Call of Lightning, Wall of Flames, and Frost Prison. Various elemental spells emerged. Shuri barely had time to land on the ground to dodge them all. As if that wasn't enough, they even unleashed a giant barrier. Jin thought the Zippel magicians were making decent moves against him. Despite their numerical advantage, they calmly opted for established strategies to eliminate risks. The different elemental spells didn't intertwine to waste energy. They harmoniously blended together to exert pressure on Jin. But that was it. They didn't take into account the unpredictability that a true genius was capable of. It barely surprised them. How could they imagine that they themselves were not geniuses and that Jin possessed a much higher knowledge of magic than they did? Whoosh! Shuri evaded the flame that suddenly surged from the ground by leaping into the air. The Zippel magicians were waiting. They raised their staffs simultaneously and aimed at Shuri. It was the same as when they fired the lightning bolts. The 10 who were not casting shield barriers all unleashed the same offensive spell. Tear them apart. They unleashed the winds of hell, the epitome of an 8-star wind-based attack spell. The artificially created winds flew towards Shuri and Jin. The winds were as deadly as blades fused with aura and were translucent, making it difficult to predict their trajectory. And most importantly, Shuri was in the air, making it impossible to dodge the attack. I'm sure they chose the spell because they can't go wrong with the range, and because it would be difficult for me to block it with the sword. But Jin was waiting for the Zippel magicians to also unleash the winds of hell. Inverse sky. Just before the winds of hell reached him, a small patch of space above Jin's head distorted. It was the opening to create the inverse sky orb. Once mana filled the space to create a tornado, the opening widened to become the inverse sky orb. 9-star mana was required to cast a proper inverse sky. But Jin had been casting an incomplete inverse sky with his 7-star mana. But Jin had no intention of launching the inverse sky with his mana at that moment. 10 winds of hell swallowed Shuri in the air. The spell's mana entangled and completely enveloped Shuri's descending form. The magicians expected to hear the sounds of Shuri's flesh and bones being cut and sliced. But instead, they heard a mysterious noise like the winds of hell and their mana being shredded by a saw. In that brief instant, the magicians instinctively felt that something was wrong. Whoosh! Shuri and Jin landed on the ground without a single scar on their bodies. And before a second passed, the tiny speck of distortion that had caused the inverse sky turned into the largest orb Jin had ever released. The magicians felt as if the entire sky had been covered by it. Moreover, the orb emitted a grotesque sound, like the screams of a demonic creature. Before the magicians could figure out what was happening, Jin unleashed the backlash cascade he had performed in the air through simultaneous casting. The inverse sky activated with the least amount of mana needed. Next, he swung the backlash cascade with simultaneous casts, like a shield to change the direction of the winds of hell. With that, all the winds of hell were sucked into the opening of the inverse sky, turning them into the energy needed to operate the inverse sky. In other words, he absorbed the winds of hell and turned them against the Zippel magicians. The inverse sky was now larger than that of a 9-star mage, for which Jin only had to spend enough mana to cast the backlash cascade. Of course, this was something only theoretically possible for most mages who were not Jin. The inverse sky Jin launched into the air was a combination of at least 5 nearly impossible feats. A swift casting to complete the inverse sky sequence within seconds, tactical mind to accurately predict the enemy's next move, simultaneous casting, precise control to accurately define the starting point of a spell while in mid-air. And in addition to all these, the audacity and confidence to carry it all out in a life-or-death situation. This is how magic is used. Jean smiled. A drop of blood trickled from his lips. But the slight injury was not a sign of backlash from using too much mana. When he swung the backlash cascade like a shield, the impact of the winds of hell caused his arm to hit his lips. He felt his mouth go numb. But aside from that, Jean was completely unharmed. Squad, deploy shields. The captain was the first to realize the situation. He shouted orders like a madman. Half of the magicians had no idea what was going on. His understanding of magic was on another level. That's what the captain thought of Jean. If he had known that Jean had such talent and also mastered the secret technique of Kiddard Hall, he would have surely fought differently. Although they were not elite or special forces of the Zippel, they had 20 magicians. How could they know they would be rejected in a magical and tactical spell battle? By a provisional flag-bearer of Runcandle who hadn't even reached 20. No less? After absorbing all the mana from the winds of hell, the inverse sky started to suck mana from the area. First, it went for the shield barriers that had been set up against the Sword of Legends techniques. The attacking group cast new barriers, but rushed casts always did more harm than good for the magicians. Several magicians were already in recoil. It wasn't an easy task for adequately talented magicians who were only slightly above average to cast barriers immediately after executing a big spell like the Winds of Hell. They were already destined for defeat once the Winds of Hell were absorbed by the inverse sky. You shouldn't have cast barriers. You should have withdrawn your mana and fled. That way, one or two lucky ones might have had a chance to escape. In his past life, Jean constantly felt a sense of inferiority and defeat compared to his brothers and the knights of the Runcandle clan. But he had never felt envy for the Zippel magicians. Jean only started learning magic at the age of 25, but he reached 5 stars within 3 years. The so-called talented magicians didn't surpass him even then. The only person who made him feel inferior in terms of ability was Baradin. But Jean always thought that he would have surpassed Baradin too if he had started with magic earlier. And in this life it was now a reality. And not only that, Baradin became the only Zippel that Jean genuinely liked. Shing! Sigmund emerged from its sheath. The blade gleamed brightly in the sunlight. The magicians felt like they were in the corridor of death. The inverse sky had them shackled and left them with no means to defend against it. Pierced through their defenses, Shuri lowered its stance and lunged forward like an arrow. The magicians who hadn't fallen into recoil yet cast spells to stop the feline, but their incantations were cut like falling leaves against the lightning-filled waves of Jin's sword. From that moment on, it wasn't a battle anymore. It was a massacre. Jean had no intention of leaving any of them alive. Please don't take it personally. Mourn the fact that you belong to the Zippel. You bastard. The Zippel will surely bring you down. Good to hear that. I would have been greatly disappointed if you begged for your life. With every strike of Jin's sword, the magicians fell to the ground like marionettes whose strings had been cut. A group of journalists arrived at the port. Upon seeing the scene, they covered their mouths, astonished. What's happening? The golden castle delivered by the Zippel was melting in the fire. And in front of it all was Jean, bringing death to the Zippel magicians. Tonight, his name would be on every paper in the land. Chapter 256. Jean immediately left the port after killing all the magicians. He intentionally took a few corners to throw off his pursuers and jumped into the ocean from a cliff he had observed earlier. Shuri let out a cry of joy as they plunged into the water. It meant that there was no one chasing them anymore. Jean let out a deep sigh of relief and wiped the sweat off his forehead. You can come out now, Dante. Jean pulled Dante out of Shuri's mouth and was startled to see the blood-soaked cloak that had been wrapped around Dante. Why so much blood? Shuri's fangs must have pierced through him earlier. It wasn't just the inner lining of the cloak. Dante was drenched in blood, and Jean was worried that Dante might have died. Are you all right? Jean asked. I'm fine, haha. You have a hole in your shoulder. I'm sorry. Whoa. It's deeper than I thought. Well, it was an animal that did it. I'm sure it didn't mean to harm me. Jean shrugged and handed Dante a healing ointment. Dante washed off the blood with seawater and applied the ointment to the wound. Jean noticed that his entire body was covered in scars from his rigorous training. I remember Baradin saying something similar when Murakan scratched him at the middle portal. These two seem so different, but they're actually quite similar. Jean. Yes. What are you going to do now? Dante asked, concerned. He knew Jean had killed the magicians, even though they had wrapped him up and covered him with a cloak. He also knew that Jean had used magic. Dante didn't know about the pact between the Zipple and the Run Candle, but he knew that the Run Candle strictly prohibited the use of magic. What else can I do? I'll have to keep running. We're still too close to relax. And what about you? What did you plan to do? Don't tell me you thought you could escape on that small sailboat after setting the gold on fire. That's actually what we planned to do. The sailboat Dante and Baradin arrived on wasn't an optimal escape vessel. You both would have been in serious trouble if you hadn't run into me today. Baradin would have been killed by his father, and the Hyran would have incurred a huge debt because of you. Jean patted Shuri's back and urged the large feline to swim faster. I guess you're right. I wasn't in a position to ask you that question. I agreed with Baradin because he was so determined and resolute, but now that I think about it, it was foolish. Although nothing was as crazy as what you did. They both burst into laughter at the same time. I'm worried about our dear companion, Baradin. Dante gave a bitter smile. He won't die because of that. I held back when I hit him, Jean said. I didn't mean that. Are you worried that he might cause a scene in his clan? No way. I'm sure he understands why I hit him. I didn't mean that either. What do you mean? I'm worried about our companion, Baradin. I can't say for sure, but he didn't seem to have any idea about what the Zipple have been doing all this time. A brief silence followed. Of course, every clan must have its own dirty secrets if you dig deep enough. But the Zipple took it too far. I actually wasn't so sure about him until now. I thought he might have been involved in some of the clan Zipple's atrocities. Do you still think the same? No. What do you think will happen from now on? Jean looked Dante in the eyes. In my opinion, there can only be two types of future for Baradin. Either he will go against his clan and be excommunicated, or he will submit and surrender to the clan. Otherwise, he might end up dead like Karl Zipple, instead of being excommunicated. Jean thought of the Baradin from his past life. He was a mage who reached 9 stars at the age of 30 and was known as the successor of the Zipple hierarchy even then. He was admired by all the young mages of the time. He was also reputed to have a good character, which made him a favorite among the people. But all of that was information he had read in newspapers in his past life. I wonder what Baradin was really like back then. The Jean of this life had a completely different adolescence. In his previous life, he hadn't even reached 1 star in swordsmanship. The entire clan regarded him as a waste. But now, he was a wandering provisional flag-bearer. He had caused many world-changing incidents, including today's incident, discovered the secret histories of many gods, revealed the various faces of different factions, and uncovered the truth about the people around him. He even met people he could call friends. And Jean had unconsciously tried to keep his distance from one of them, Baradin. It was because of their legacies as Run Candle and Zipple. Dante was a different story, but when it came to Baradin, Jean thought a clash between them was inevitable. He felt it even more intensely after discovering the use André Zipple had made of the demon god stone and the biological experiments. It didn't matter if Baradin wanted it for himself or not. Jean believed that Baradin would have to get involved at some point. But that wasn't true. In fact, Baradin set the gold on fire out of shame for his clan. He risked his life and attempted to kill the magicians from his own clan. The catalyst for his impulsive decision was simply the fact that his friend, who exposed all these truths, was attacked. But we can't let that happen, Jean finished his sentence. Dante blinked in surprise. He expected Jin's response to be colder and more calculated. Perhaps because of what Jean had said the previous night in the arena, when the three of them were drinking together. But you know what? Maybe it's not so bad to remain allies once we're done fighting. We'll settle who the winner is and try to remain friends, Baradin had said. I never imagined that the successor of the Zippel Patriarchate would make such a weak statement. Maybe there's a reason why Jean can't talk about it yet, Baradin. We should probably stop discussing the topic. You always distance yourself from us. Did you ever consider that maybe you're the strange one for not distancing yourself at all? But now, Jean was saying that he couldn't let those things happen to Baradin. Why are you so surprised? Jean asked Dante. I mean, it's nothing. I'm just a little surprised that you volunteered to save Baradin. First, I need to hear what Baradin thinks about this. So let's go there. There? Our secret hideout. Shuri, speed up. By the way, what did you need the money for? I was horrified when I saw the gold ingot coming out of your pocket earlier. You're the successor of the Hyran clan. Why would you need that measly gold ingot? Ah, about that. Dante hesitated for a moment but continued. Not long ago, I made a mistake and broke a vase that my grandfather cherished. He's lenient with most things, but he treasures his ceramics as if they're a part of him. I had to restore it before he found out. It cost me a fortune to hire a famous restorer. What? Ron's love for ceramics was well known among martial artists. It was so infamous that it was said the first step to improving any diplomatic relationship with the Hyran clan was to become friends with the kingdom of Mila's master potters. It's quite embarrassing for me to say it. So, since we're on the topic, I was wondering. It was understandable. As the Patriarch's successor, it wouldn't bode well for him to spend mysterious sums of money. And if he spent a large sum of money, Ron would undoubtedly receive a report about it. If I can lend you money? Dante nodded. Sure. You're the best, Jean. They crossed the sea for 6 continuous hours. Fortunately, no one found any trace of them. The sea was dark, without a single lighthouse after sunset. The glimmer of Dante's eyes was the only thing emitting light in the distance. On January 1st, 1798, a new year dawned. For most people, the first day of the year was spent giving blessings to their loved ones, facing the first sunrise of the new year with their lovers, or if not, sleeping in since it was a holiday. But this man, the guardian knight Khan, was dousing himself in the blood, organs, and bone fragments of demonic creatures, just like he did on the first day of 1796. He was slashing through demonic creatures at an alarming pace. He didn't even take the briefest of breaks. He charged through the dark sea for 3 days and 3 nights straight, with an anxious look on his face. Patriarch! Siren had sensed Khan approaching for some time, but he only slowly opened his eyes after Khan let out his urgent call. You seem to be in a hurry. What brings you here? Young Master Jean has really done it this time. Surprisingly, Siren merely nodded without changing his expression much. It seemed like he had expected something like this to happen. Khan pulled out papers from his inner pockets and politely offered them to the Patriarch, but they weren't letters from Kashmir. They were rolled-up bulletins. Reserve flag-bearer of the Runcandilas demolishes the golden castle of the Zippels. This hybrid Runcandle uses both magic and lightning. Who is this Jean Runcandle? Youngest son of domination reveals the ugly side of justice. Atrocities committed in the name of the Zippel clan. The biological experiments of the Zippel Golem and Kinzalo. They are preparing for war. The first Runcandle of the 1700s breaking the strict rule of reserve flag-bearers. Will the demigod let him live? Lonnie Salome refers to Jean Runcandle as a friend 3 times in the sacred coronation ceremony. But she seems steadfast in her determination to close the nation's borders for all activities other than civilian rescue. However, the Holy Kingdom announced their renewed periodic missions of the saints to the Runcandle clan. This is the victory of the reserve flag-bearer. The bulletins were filled with such articles. Siren maintained a mysterious gaze as he read through all the articles. He really did it this time. Lady Rosa has called for an emergency meeting of the flag-bearers, sir. She said she would wait for your decision, Patriarch. But she seemed ready to deploy all the flag-bearers to capture young Master Jean immediately. Khan then handed him the bulletins from the Lutero-Magical Federation. They had a very different tone. Heliak Zippel declares holding the Runcandle clan responsible. The Zippel clan sanctions the embargo of practical magic items to the allied realms of Huffister. Embargo to persist until Jean Runcandle is delivered. The worldwide arrest warrant for Jean Runcandle goes into effect today. The Zippel clan has promised 100 million gold coins and lifelong protection to anyone who captures. Kinzalo is the mastermind behind the biological experiments, not the Zippel clan. Alliance links proven false. Fake news born from Runcandle. Zippel Tower Masters reveal official resolution for total war. The reserve flag-bearer of domination threatens world peace. A faint smile blossomed on Siren's face after reading the bulletins from the Lutero-Magical Federation. This is a great achievement. Khan bowed his head and awaited the Patriarch's words. I sent him to make a name for himself, but not only did he do that, he also raised the reputation of the Runcandle clan and trampled on the honor of the Zippel clan. This is worthy of being called a great achievement. Khan let out a sigh of relief to himself. He hadn't expected Siren to turn a blind eye to such a big incident, regardless of how much he treasured Jean. But what Siren said next made Khan nervous again. But aside from the achievements, Jean always knew how to take responsibility for his actions. Khan, yes, Patriarch. Issue a priority arrest order for Jean. From this moment on, capturing Jean should be a constant mission for every flag-bearer, Guardian Knight, and Cadet. Promise 300 million gold coins and absolute protection from the Runcandle clan to anyone who captures him, dead or alive. Note: these families really? Chapter 257. The patriarchs of the two major factions each promised 300 and 100 million gold coins for his capture. It was the first time in human civilization history that a figure of 100 million was promised for the capture of a man. The world, already buzzing with news of the Holy Kingdom incident, was stirred by the news of the arrest warrants. Elite mercenary groups like the Black Kings and the Spectres started their independent searches, while smaller groups joined forces for the hunt. Even state military forces and cavalries of smaller kingdoms eagerly searched for Jean. It was the expected response, as 300 million gold coins were more than enough to boost the economy of an entire kingdom. But their pursuit contributed little to the search. No other group searched for Jean as eagerly and desperately as the two major clans, the Runcandles and the Zippels. Thousands of Guardian Knights, mages, the armies they commanded, and allied clans from both factions formed exploration parties to search for Jean. Young Master, I wonder if he'll be okay, Gilly sighed. She held a wanted poster of Jean Runcandle, the reserve flag-bearer. All her companions were gathered in Tychen watching the situation unfold. The promise Jean obtained from Siren in the past still held. No Runcandle could set foot in Tychen without Jin's explicit permission. Thanks to that promise, the Runcandle Guardian Knights didn't enter Tychen, but there were about 50 of them waiting in the vicinity of the island. On the other hand, the Zippel mages thoroughly searched every inch of Tychen before departing. They searched the records of every portal in the world for cases involving Jean Grey and Bammel, which pointed to Tychen as their base of operations. Of course, the Zippels didn't glean much from their search there. They completely disregarded the fact that Tychen was a neutral state. They even forced their way into Kashimir's mansion but didn't find Jean. The reason was simple. Jean wasn't there. He'll be fine. Don't worry too much, strawberry shortcake, said Murakan. Gilly weakly nodded. Seeing that, Murakan made a face. He wasn't disgusted. Literally, he was contorting his face back and forth to make her smile. That's it. Don't be so sad because of that foolish boy. You should keep smiling like that. It's nice to see you smile. Gilly couldn't help but laugh, and soon she burst into loud laughter, making Murakan smile along with her. All these crazies. How can it be funny? Varys secretly cursed while watching the two and frowned. Note: Varys before, Varys now. And, surprisingly, Kazan mimicked Murakan and started contorting his face. Varys desperately tried to hold back laughter this time. Now it was Yulian's turn to share his thoughts. Kazan and Varys. Those lunatics are having a good time. But even Yulian had to smile when Yuria suddenly approached him and nudged him in the side, asking him to play. In other words, the whole world was busy with people trying to hunt down Jean, but Taiken was quite peaceful. That, despite the various factions that arrived on the island to ransack it, Lord Jean has truly become a great figure. In fact, he's the most popular person on Earth right now. Kashmir brushed back his hair. His expression showed fatigue. You have no idea how those Zippel mages scrutinized every inch of my safe houses. It gives me a headache just thinking about it. But since we agreed to their search, the Zippels can't say anything against us for a while, as they searched our house without good justification or any solid evidence. Elisa tapped Kashmir's shoulder as she spoke. Although Jean had been to Taiken before, the Zippels had no reason or justification to force an extensive search of Taiken since it was a neutral force. Therefore, the Zippels couldn't meddle in Taiken's affairs for a while. As Elisa just mentioned, the Zippels were certainly powerful, but that didn't mean they could get away with everything concerning neutral factions outside of the Literomagiccal Federation. I was really surprised when the royal guards from Vermont arrived. This time it was Enya who spoke. Quickentel nodded as well. Although the Vermonts didn't search Taiken as thoroughly as the Zippels, the two were still unofficially wanted by the Vymonth. Especially now that Jean Grey's name had been revealed to the world, the Vermonts were also tracing the identity of Austin Grey, Enya's fake name she used in the incident with the remains of the Dark Magic Guild. But the three cadets from the academy that Jean and Enya used as servants back then, namely Chip, Mora, and Oral, concealed from the Vermont leaders the secret that Austin had actually been Enya. Thanks to that, the Vermonts didn't search Taiken as thoroughly as the Zippels. But we should be thankful that the Run Candles haven't come. If they were here, they would create a disaster, destroying everything in sight, digging up lands and demolishing things. Jet shrugged and continued. But I can't understand Sir Siren. I thought he definitely cared for our dear lord. That's why he checked most of his deviations and still forbids the Run Candles from entering Taiken, right? I can't understand why he would put a 300 million gold coin bounty on Lord Jin's head. Jet sounded extremely annoyed by that fact. Why don't you raise it with him if you're so curious? Murakan asked. Humph, this Jet doesn't back down. If you take me to the Dark Sea where Sir Siren is, Master Murakan, I can always bring it up, yes, sir. Are you crazy? Who said you can ride me? Plus, once you face Siren, weaklings like you will suffocate and won't even be able to open your eyes from the gravity he exudes. But still, don't you feel upset about it? I thought Sir Siren would definitely take care of our lord. But now, the Run Candles are more eager to kill Lord Jean than the Zippels. I'm so frustrated, yes I am. The boy's father must have a reason for doing so. I thought I told you that yesterday. What reason could that be? Humph. I also have a son. But I would never do something like that, no sir. Sure. I understand how you feel, but wait a moment. Why is this guy taking it out on me? Hey, insect. Haven't you been disciplining your lackeys? Murakan asked. But I also agree with Mr. Jet. If Lord Jean is captured by bounty hunters or the Run Candles, how am I supposed to go on living? Enya shouted, making Murakan's eyes widen in surprise. Wait, what does that have to do with your life? Lord Jean is my light, the carrier of my life energy. He's essentially my life force. The world will lose all meaning without Lord Jean. I can't bear this at all. Mr. Jet, let's go and talk to Sir Siren face to face about it. Yes, that's right. Enya and Jet high-fived each other and pompously left the room. Murakan clicked his tongue as they left, and the rest of the companions simply laughed. Quickantle was the only one who sighed deeply. Of course, the two never actually went to Siren. Instead, they went to Latree's confectionery to steal cookies and tea while talking behind Siren's back. Rub. Siren scratched his ears, as his experienced senses, sharpened as a demigod, felt an itch in his ears. He always had rather noisy visitors. Tick, Mott, the snow toad, opened a dimensional door. Siren! Unlike Enya and Jet, here was a person who could truly come to Siren to complain. Talaris, the ruler of the secret palace, was fuming and shouted as soon as she saw Siren. "You'll break my eardrums. My internal organs burn with frustration. That's why. What the hell do you think you're doing? Don't you ever think about how I would feel? No, how my daughter would feel about it. Not even a marriage. They weren't even engaged. Yet she demanded that he consider Cirrus." Siren found it ridiculous, but he kept his eyes closed without responding. Now that he reflected on his behavior, he realized Talaris was always like this. "Siren, you better think carefully. You must know how public opinion must be after Kiliak killed his own son, Karl Zippel, just to cover up the incident. The situation with the Zippels and the Run Candles is different, Talaris. It's not like Jean has caused harm to the Run Candle clan. In fact, he brought them much more profit. But an arrest warrant? When they should be rewarding him. Besides the fact that he broke the pact, you still have plenty of reasons to take care of him, don't you?" "Ribbit. Ribbit." Mott croaked loudly, as if he wanted to say he sympathized with Talaris's complaint. But when Siren glanced at him, Mott averted his big eyes elsewhere and pretended to be busy. "It has already been decided. The decision will stand." "My goodness. Don't tell me you actually want to kill Jean. Do I have to be more obvious?" He didn't hesitate for a second. Talaris was about to say something, but instead, she took out a cigarette from her inner pockets. She smoked a whole cigarette in one breath and stuck another one in her mouth. She finished 5 consecutive cigarettes and looked at Siren. "Siren, don't tell me you've succumbed to chaos after your battle with the Dark Sea Kings. I suspected you had lost your humanity after reaching the height of a demigod. But this isn't right. You wouldn't do this unless you were mad." Shriek Ice gathered in Talaris's right hand and formed into a sword. The Sea Ice Sword, the divine sword she had chosen. "And what exactly are you trying to do right now? If you have truly succumbed to chaos, as the master of the Sea Ice Sword and as your friend, I cannot allow it. Show me proof that you're still sane before I count to 3. If not, I'll stab you. 1, 2. Siren gave a faint smile as he watched Talaris. "You haven't forgotten our promise. Withdraw your sword, Talaris." "You guessed wrong." Their conversation up until now was Siren's test for Talaris. On the other hand, Talaris had also unsheathed the Sea Ice Sword as a gamble to hear Siren's innermost thoughts. She knew he wouldn't reveal his true intentions because she was a stranger, whether an old friend or not. She had considered the possibility of Siren succumbing to chaos. Talaris sheathed her Sea Ice Sword. The plains in the central region of the Black Sea froze into a fan shape behind her. A vast area was frozen due to her powers, and one couldn't even see where the frost ended. "I have no idea what happened to that charming lion of the Run Candles. Now all that's left is this peculiar old man. Very well then, tell me, what is your intention? My father has given me another chance." "How can you interpret it that way? I didn't know you had such a carefree side. Just like the Zippels, the patriarch of the Run Candles, your own father issued the arrest warrant. It can't be a publicity stunt." Dante replied as he handed him the bulletin. "Even if I hid you within my own clan, I can't say we would last more than 2 months. I'm sure this place, Baradin's vacation home, is no different. If the Run Candles and the Zippels were putting all their forces into finding one man, there wasn't a single person who could escape their clutches. They would track them down everywhere, no matter where they hid. This was even more impossible for a celebrity like Jean. You're right, and I'll never survive if they catch me. Well, if they catch me, that is. On the other hand, if I'm not captured for over a year and I return to my clan, of my own accord, my reputation will skyrocket as the reserve flag-bearer who played not only with the Zippels but also with the Run Candle clan. The way Jean made fools of the Zippels was a genuine embarrassment for them. But for the Run Candles, although it would still be a disgrace, ironically, their reputation would also increase. Are you saying Sir Siren would retract his arrest warrant in that case? He won't retract his arrest warrant for Jean Run Candle, the reserve flag-bearer. But there was never an arrest warrant for Jean Run Candle, the flag-bearer, at all. Whoa, I feel like you'll somehow make it happen. If anyone could. But honestly, I'm not so sure. Are you sure you can hold out against the Run Candle and Zipple clans for a whole year? Even for Jean, it would be an impossible feat if he had to hide in the human world. However, it was a different story if he could hide in his brother's land. My father must know that I would hide in La Ferosa because he has the report from Sir Kashmir. But Dante didn't need to know that. He was about to respond with a smile when he saw the private portal door of the vacation home shining with light through the window. Duck! Jean and Dante pressed against the window and ducked. There was always the possibility that the person coming out of the portal wasn't Baradin but other Zipples. Chapter 258. A single person emerged from the portal. But the person wore a hood and a mask, making it difficult to distinguish a face. I don't think it's Baradin. I thought the same. Jean and Dante spoke. Though they couldn't see the face, the build was too different. The person coming out of the portal had the physique of someone who had trained in martial arts for a long time. In fact, the person carried a long sword at their waist. Couldn't be Baradin. Jean recalled what Baradin had said when they made the pact to use the property as a safe house. This is the address of my private vacation home. My clan never watches over me or interferes with anything that happens here, Baradin had said. I'll give your names to my stewards, so you can visit me whenever you want without much trouble. Oh, maybe it's the steward. There was no one here when we arrived. As Dante said, they hadn't met the steward yet. There was no one when they arrived. The door was locked, so they kicked it open and had been waiting for Baradin for 3 days. The person seems too strong to be a steward, though. I agree. The masked figure's gaze fell on the broken door. The masked figure stood still amid the roaring sounds of the waves and stared at the broken door for some time. It was clear that something displeased them. For some reason, both their hearts sank. Xing! The masked figure drew their long sword. They must think there's an intruder. Yes. Maybe we should step forward and tell them honestly? If that masked figure isn't on Baradin's side, we should kill or subdue that person. I don't know about you, but I can't afford to get caught now. They had to consider the possibility that the masked figure was there on the Zipple clan's orders. Jean unsheathed Bradamanti and activated the Myalta rune. Dante was lost for a moment but soon tore his robe to cover his face and followed Jean. Silently, they stepped out into the hallway. They concealed their energies and took their positions. They hid on either side of the hallway, in the left corridor and the right room. Soon, they felt the masked figure moving. Unlike the two who had concealed their energies, the person walked down the hallway emitting a force that clearly revealed a killing intent. The masked figure passed by the room where Jean was hiding. Jean emerged and attacked the person. He easily approached from behind and pointed his sword at their throat. Dante leaped at the same time and disarmed the person. Don't scream. If you answer my questions, I'll let you live. They perfectly subdued the person. But Jean felt something was off. The masked figure seemed completely calm, even with a sword at their throat. Who are you? The person didn't respond. Don't make me ask twice. This is your last chance. Who are you? Jean was about to continue his threat. Splash! The person's body disappeared. Rather, what had composed their body turned into water. Jean, who had been pressing his sword against the person's throat, lost balance, and Dante looked around in horror. It's a dragon. Jin's instinct told him. The masked figure was a dragon, and a water dragon at that, a dragon of Atelmian, the water god. More than 80% of the active dragons in the human world belonged to the Zipple clan. So, the water dragon they had just encountered would likely be under the Zipple's control as well. The water dragon that had turned into water now flowed toward the end of the hallway. Jean and Dante hurried to chase after it. Jean didn't need to explain to Dante why they couldn't let the dragon escape. But their worries were unnecessary. I've never seen such audacious brats. No wonder Baradin is interested in you. The water dragon transformed back into human form at the end of the hallway and shrugged. Stop trying to attack me. I only tried to kill you because I thought you were intruders. Jean and Dante exchanged looks with each other. With all due respect, may I ask what brings you here? Was it Baradin who sent you? Jean sheathed his sword and bowed. The water dragon returned the gesture with a nod. Well, you could say it was him. I am the steward here. Don't look at me with that confused face. Who said dragons can't be stewards? I didn't say anything or give a glance. Really? Well then. The water dragon took off their mask. They had delicate features on their face, which seemed out of place for their muscular build. The blue hair that reached their shoulders made them almost look like a lady, as long as one only looked at their face. Does this mean Baradin is a contractor of Itelmian? Thoughts immediately rushed into Jin's head. He had never considered the possibility of Baradin being a divine contractor. Even in his past life, Baradin was known to be a 9-star magician, but there was no information about him being a contractor. In fact, there were no Itelmian contractors in my past life. Of course, Jin couldn't know everything that had happened in his past life. He didn't have access to intelligence organizations like the Seven-Colored Peacocks, so he had serious limitations in accessing information that wasn't revealed to the public. On the other hand, Baradin being a contractor wasn't surprising at all. The Zippel clan had the highest number of contractors among their ranks, and divine contracts were usually decided based on talent and potential. As Baradin was the most gifted among the young generation of the Zippels, he would obviously be a contractor. My name is Tuyen. I would say you two are Jean Runcandle and Dante Hyran. Pleased to meet you. Tuyen. I think we have intruders. Before Jean could respond, another dragon appeared outside the vacation home. The dragoness, who casually called the water dragon by their name, lowered her long neck and placed her head in the hallway to look at the two boys. Oh, aren't those the boys Baradin mentioned? Yes, Phinia. He said their names are Jean Runcandle and Dante Hyran. Nice to see you, boys. I've always wanted to see you. Phinia transformed back into her human form and grinned widely. She was an earth dragon of Ricta, the earth god. Even Jean was confused at this point. Dante was overwhelmed, and he couldn't stop casting glances from Jean to the dragons. Have you come to see Baradin? Phinia asked, walking toward them with a light step. Yes, we have. He'll arrive in an hour. We have to prepare some things before he comes. So why don't you take a rest in the reception? By the way, were you the ones who broke the door? Both of them nodded, to which Phinia sighed. The key is under the huge rock next to the entrance, so if Baradin or we aren't here next time, use the key to open the door. It's quite a hassle to bring materials here when things break. Jean and Dante nodded, still confused by everything. Tuyen and Phinia headed to the storage shed next to the house without saying anything more. Surprisingly, what they brought from the shed were cleaning supplies. Well then, I thought I told you to go to the reception. Are they trying to clean the house before Baradin arrives? Jean felt puzzled. Dante must have felt the same because he spoke quickly. Let us help too. Nonsense. We can't let our guests do the chores. Baradin would be angry if you did. Tuyen formed water and spread it on the floor to start mopping. Then, Phinia ushered the two boys away. Jean and Dante had no choice but to sit in the reception. For some reason, they felt very uncomfortable. Those dragons were really cleaning, weren't they? The two dragons, who were the stewards, were cleaning the vacation house before Baradin arrived. I think so. Well, I'm glad they're not under the orders of other Zippels. But it's been quite a surprise. They sat and waited for the dragons to finish cleaning. Dante seemed to be on pins and needles. He couldn't hide his anxiety. Meanwhile, Jean pondered which of the two could be. Baradin's guardian dragon. The water one, the earth one. Which one could it be? Jin's curiosity was immediately answered when Baradin arrived at the vacation house an hour later. My friends! Haha! What joy to see you again. I thought the last time would be the last time we saw each other. I hope my guardian dragons weren't too harsh on you, right? Guardian dragons. That's how Baradin referred to the two dragons who courteously bowed when Baradin arrived. It was quite a shocking scene, but Jean decided to stop being surprised. Whether he was contracted by two gods at the same time or hiding something else, that didn't change the fact that he had rebelled against the Zippel clan with his own life. Similarly, Jean was hiding many things from them as well. By the way, Dante is one thing, but I didn't expect Jean to be here too. Were you so worried about me that you risked your arrest warrant? I'm so moved that I'm about to cry. Look into my eyes. They're moist, you see? Have you calmed down? Yes, thanks to you. I must have been crazy back then. I would have died if it weren't. For you and at the hands of my father, too. In fact, I was close to death myself. The mana reflux was so severe that I still have migraines. Baradin responded casually. The three of them silently looked at each other for a while. The dragons brought them tea. Jean. Yes. You have a plan, don't you? There was bitterness in Baradin's eyes as he spoke. He asked if Jean had plans because he knew he couldn't do much to help. It wasn't like the last time he set fire to the gold. Even if he rebelled without much consideration, there wasn't much he could change. That made Baradin feel awful about himself. Jean had saved his life, but he couldn't help Jean in any way. Jean was practically a dead man when his clan decided to capture him, and now even the run candles were after him. Baradin couldn't find a way for Jean to survive. That serious look doesn't suit you, Baradin. Unlike you, I'm someone who plans before rushing in. I have ways to survive. Really? So don't worry about that. Instead, I have something I'd like to propose to you. What is it? Abandon your surname. Whoop! Dante spat out the tea he was drinking. In fact, he even dropped the teacup he was holding, spilling hot tea on his thighs. But he was so shocked that he barely registered the pain. That's how impactful Jin's words were. I will eliminate the entire Zippel clan in the future, and that name doesn't suit you either. Each of your brothers and your uncle who died at my hands were all involved in terrible acts, including biological experiments. I knew it. So, you were the one who killed my uncle too. The fact that Myron Zippel had died at the hands of Bamel, who was Jean, was now known to everyone. Dino reminded people of the tragedies of Colin when writing columns about the incident in the Holy Kingdom. How much do you know? About what? About what the Zippels, your clan, are preparing, Jean said. Baradin gave a bitter smile. Well, I'm not sure how much I know. I'm asking you a serious question. And I'm answering you with complete seriousness, Jean Runcandle. Have you ever experienced something like this? Like trying to write your diary? But yesterday's entry is completely different from what I remember from the day. What? My memory is being manipulated by someone. I thought my uncle was behind it because it didn't happen again after his death. But take a look at this. Baradin took out a notebook from his inner pockets. It was the entry for December 25, 1797, the day after Jean revealed his identity. December 25, 1797. I would have died yesterday if it weren't for him. I felt bad for the clan's decision, but to think I would lose all rationality like that. My chin still hurts from his punch. But thanks to him, I survived. His decision was right. If I had ever harmed the magicians of the clan, my father could have killed me too. It might well have been my last encounter with them. I hope both of them are safe. Although their names weren't mentioned, it was clear that it referred to Dante and Jean. This is the entry I wrote right after my mana reflux treatment. But after the follow-up treatment, I lost all memory of what happened that day. In fact, I don't even remember setting fire to the gold. I told you I didn't expect you to arrive because I acted accordingly. After reading my diary and the bulletins. Chapter 259. Trackers. 1. Altering your memory? What do you mean by that? Dante's eyes widened in horror. Even Jean felt a chill run down his spine. The clan has been manipulating my mind for some time. Forging memories is actually feasible in magical theory, you know. As Baradin said, it was theoretically possible. There were rumors that the Special Force Vermont was also secretly forging memories. But the only faction truly capable of memory forging was the Zippel clan. Dante realized that Baradin wasn't joking. He was stunned by the shock for some time. I can't believe it. Why would someone do that? What do they gain by falsifying your memories? My friend. I have no idea either. It's the first time it has happened since my uncle's death, so it must be the elders or... Baradin paused and furrowed his brow. Or they did it on my father's orders to falsify my memory. But I can't understand their motives, especially considering the recent incident. It's not like I witnessed something I shouldn't have. The whole world saw how my clan tried to cover up the Holy Kingdom incident with money. It seems the memory manipulation might have been imperfect, Jean replied after hearing his story. Baradin's eyes widened. That's convincing. Maybe they were trying to erase another memory and accidentally manipulated the memory of that day as well. I'm sure doing things like that must be hard to pull off perfectly, even for my clan. You realize it's nothing to be happy about, right? But I feel like I've finally found a clue. It makes some sense when you put it that way. But what memory were they trying to erase then? There was nothing particular in the recent entries of my diary. It's just a theory. But I feel like your theory might be correct. Still, you would know better than me. How could I know which memory your clan is trying to erase from your head? Ugh. Trying to think is giving me a headache again. Jean remembered the day Latrie returned to Tychon. Lord Jean, there's something I must inform you of first. My daughter's guardian dragon returned today about 3 hours ago, Kashmir had said. Latrie has come back? Yes. But there's something strange about him. He doesn't seem to remember anything from the entire time he was missing. For now, he's with my daughter, but he also doesn't seem to understand what has happened. Could it be that he wasn't kidnapped? It can't be, since Bayuretta herself confessed it to Quicantle. Jean also thought it was strange that Latrie's memories had disappeared. He hoped the Zippels had erased Latrie's memories, but to think they would do the same to Baradin. Or maybe Baradin was lying, or he could simply be mistaken. But Jean decided to dismiss those possibilities. Latrie's memories must have been erased by the demon god's stone. They erased all his memories during the period he was kidnapped. The reason they bothered to alter his memories instead of simply killing him must have been a measure to ensure the safety of AZ Mills' contractor. If that was the case, Baradin's memory manipulation could also have something to do with the demon god's stone. Perhaps the reason Baradin risked his life to set fire to the gold wasn't, after all, his anger over the Holy Kingdom incident. It's likely that Baradin witnessed other atrocities committed by the Zippel clan, like the demon god's stone, before setting fire to the gold. And amidst his confusion, the revelation of the Holy Kingdom incidents made him impulsively rebel against his clan. Jean thought about it and sighed inwardly. The migraines he suffered and the extreme instability he showed in the Holy Kingdom could also be side effects of memory manipulation. But it was not a good idea to ask him if he knew about the demon god's stone. Now that he knew about Baradin's memory instability, he had to take precautions. If Baradin had been enraged by the demon god's stone, who knew what he would do after Jean mentioned it? Until they were sure Baradin would act rationally, it was best that Baradin didn't know. Baradin? Yes. I think there can only be one reason why the Zippels would be manipulating your memories. They are trying to turn you into a successor who perfectly fits their preferences. And it's not the elders who are behind it. Kiliak Zippel, your father, has to be behind all of this. Jean was sure of this now. Baradin was nothing more than a perfectly groomed successor in his past life. Unlike what was known about him in the world, Baradin had also signed a contract with two gods back then. But regardless of the type of power he obtained, all the power he amassed had to be used for the Zippels, not for himself. At that time, there was no peculiarity of Jean living his second life, and therefore, Baradin had no power to resist his own clan. He had reached the age of 30 without knowing about the atrocities his clan committed and what they were doing to him. I suppose so, don't I? Damn it, and here I thought I was an exemplary successor in my own right. Even this isn't enough to please my father, is it? I'm contracted to two gods, and my magic skills are about to reach 9 stars. Tuyen and Phinia said nothing. They had finished cleaning. They sat by the window on the other side and drank tea. No human in history had ever signed a contract with more than one god at a time. Baradin was the first human to do so, but Dante was so shocked by the memory manipulation that he barely even reacted. Jin's gaze briefly fell on the dragons. Baradin smiled when he saw it. By the way, why don't you ask? Ask you what? How I entered into a contract with two gods. You must have had so much potential, I suppose. Plus, it's not a question to ask at this moment, right? The fact that you're a magic swordsman is much crazier than the fact that I signed a contract with two gods. Wait, but that's quite annoying when you think about it. See, you keep saying that it wasn't you who killed Kiddard Hall. Not only did you kill him, but you even took his inverted sky. Jean was about to respond when Baradin continued. Furthermore, you were the one who impersonated me in the kingdom of Arkan. Hey, Dante, what do you think? I'm more scandalized that he took us for fools all this time than by my own memory manipulation. He's a swindler, that's what he is. We'll have to turn him in to the police. There they were, saying whatever came to their minds. Jean shrugged, and Dante nodded clumsily. Baradin, my friend, you don't have to try so hard. Try hard at what? You're forcing yourself to sound cheerful and bright. Jean felt a shiver down his spine as Dante spoke. Baradin must have felt the same. He seemed stunned as he blinked, but quickly shook his head. No, that's not true. I'm actually fine, you know? How can someone be fine after having their memories manipulated? And by your own clan, the one you trusted. You can be honest with us. We're friends, aren't we? Yes, the truth is, I'm fine with everything. An uncomfortable silence followed. Dante could only fake a few coughs, his ears reddening with indignation. But it seems they didn't touch the diary, even when they manipulated your memories. Those guys take care of the diaries, that's why. Baradin pointed to the dragons. Do your guardian dragons know about the memory manipulation? Yes, they do. In fact, it's the opposite. Not many people in the clan know that I'm a divine contractor and that I have two guardian dragons. But why don't they do anything about it? Because Itelmian and Ricta haven't said much about it. The two gods must have decided that it doesn't harm me. In fact, they seem eager to see me tamed soon, so that I can become the patriarch as soon as possible. Becoming the patriarch of the Zippel clan meant becoming the most powerful figure in the whole world. It was the best thing that could happen. To the two gods who chose Baradin. Not only would it elevate their reputation, but they would also have dominion over all the other contractors of the clan. Although Jean couldn't see the true motives of the two gods at the moment, it all seemed too repugnant to him. The dragons, strange and overly courteous, also got on his nerves. Puppets. The word struck him. Baradin wasn't living his own life. He was living the will of someone else. A will stained by conspiracy and atrocities. You just thought of me as a puppet, didn't you? That's insane. How did you figure it out? Startled, Jean and Dante looked at each other. Dante thought the same as Jean. So, what are you going to do now? Jean composed himself and asked. About what? Leaving the Zippels. Ah, that. I suppose it won't be easy. The only realistic way to do it is to wait for you to become a flag bearer and capture me as a hostage. But that could easily lead to a full-blown war. Besides, there's no telling how much your brothers could torture me. The Run Candles and the Zippels fight each other all the time, regardless of you. That may be true, but Jean, I also have my share of responsibilities. If my clan is going in the wrong direction, I should be the one to stay and correct it, don't you think? I'll restore everything. I'll make the Zippels the clan I've always been proud of again. That's the most unrealistic goal of all. Not if I have the help of you too. Friends or not, there are some lines we cannot cross. The Run Candles can't help the Zippels. That's very cold of you. I'm starting to feel disgusted again. Of course, I suppose I could personally help you. But what will happen afterward? Helping you will cause a division within the Zippel clan. If we succeed, the division will be so immense that the clan has never faced such a crisis. Do you think the Run Candles and the other clans will just sit back and watch? That would never happen. Once Baradin created a division within the Zippels, all factions would seize the opportunity to destroy the clan. And before that, Baradin's determination was impossible from the start. Moreover, do you think you'll still be the person you are now by then? They will continue manipulating your memories. Are you sure you can maintain your identity? I don't think it's something you can control by will or belief. You must leave the Zippel clan, Baradin. So, you think I would succumb and change my way of being if I don't, right? Yes, I do. That might be the case. I can't deny it. But Jean, you would have made the same decision as me if you were in my shoes. I'm not leaving the clan. No, if I were you, I would leave the Runcandle clan if I were forced to live a life where my own will was slowly taken away from me without my knowledge. Jean. Baradin smiled and continued. I'm not an extraordinary guy like you. There was a tone of resignation in his words. Jean didn't know what to say. Baradin wasn't a fool either. He knew better than anyone how terrifying the idea of memory manipulation and altering his personality was. The discrepancy between his diary entries and reality, and the resulting confusion, were things he had been struggling with for years. Jean, I understand Baradin too. I'd like to support his opinion, Dante said. There was a good reason why. Jean insisted on Baradin's need to leave the clan. He didn't want to face a future where he or his Runcandle brothers had to kill him. I know it's shameful to say this, but as long as you two never abandon me, I think I should be able to change clans. I don't care if the clan's powers diminish in the process. Ha! After Baradin expressed his opinion, the portal door outside the vacation house suddenly lit up. Someone was coming to this place. The only people who could come at this precise moment were members of the Zipple clan. At that very moment, the two guardian dragons who had been having tea jumped to their feet and stood before Baradin in a fraction of a second. They seemed to be protecting him. Tien? Finea. Unlike their courteous attitude before, the two dragons didn't respond. They raised their energies without much emotion. A group of magicians emerged from the portal door. They wore gray robes without crests. They had no markings of the White Knight, nor of the special and elite classes of the magicians. The gray robes didn't even inform others of their Zipple status. Jean didn't know what this meant, but he could deduce it from the way they handled mana and the speed at which they cast chain spells as they emerged from the portal door. They must be like the Black Knights of the Runcandle clan. Whoever they were, one thing was clear. They were here to capture Jean. Jean, I didn't call them. Baradin desperately shouted. Jean nodded. Baradin. It wasn't me. Believe me, really? I know. I won't hold it against you. So stop panicking and order your guardian dragons to protect Dante as well. Those guys seem to be trying to blow this whole place up. Jean looked out the window and saw that the sky was red from the chain spell cast by the gray-robed magicians. Chapter 260. Trackers, 2. How did those magicians find their way here? It was quite obvious. Either they obtained clues while manipulating Baradin's memory, or they were eavesdropping on the detection spells cast in the area. Jean expected both scenarios to some extent. He thought that the White Knight or elite magicians, or even tower masters might appear if someone pursued him here. But those gray robes, who exactly are they? Jean hadn't seen those robes in his past life either. But he was convinced that they were stronger than any other group of magicians he had faced to date. Dante was about to react and unsheath his sword when Jean grabbed him by the wrist. Don't draw your sword. If you do, they'll consider you an enemy too. That's what it seems like. I have a bad feeling, Jean. Those guys don't seem like ordinary magicians. And that's all the more reason for you to use Baradin as a shield. Baradin, move. Take care of Dante. Jean, those guys are magicians directly under my aunt's command. My aunt must have come with them, so I'll try to reason with her. I don't have to knock you out again, do I? What do you think would happen if you spoke on my behalf here? Damn. Shit. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. The aunt was the younger sister of Kiliak Zipple, Octavia Zipple. Jean knew who she was, but he only knew her name because she was part of the Zipple clan. He didn't think she had a key role. She had retired at a 7-star level even before Jean was born. Obviously, most people considered her abilities to be quite ordinary for a Zipple, and despite being Kiliak Zipple's own sister, her relatively low abilities and early retirement kept her hidden from the public eye. In other words, she was the wallflower of the Zipple clan. However, there she was, leading an unknown group of elite magicians. Jean immediately remembered what his father had said about Andre. It's accurate. He may be the vice-patriarch, but he's not second in command, as you say. The second position of power after Kiliak is held by someone else, although it's not information you need to know yet. So, She must be second in command. On the other side of the window, he could see a person wielding a shining staff amidst all the other magicians casting the chain spell. It was Octavia, and her staff was pointing directly at where he was. Whoosh! Jean almost missed the moment when the staff released its bolt. The magical light beam Octavia fired wasn't a spell. It was more like a thrust from a master swordsman. Shing! Jean pushed Dante toward Baradin and unsheathed Sigmund. He didn't unsheath it to block the attack. Not even 9-star swordsmen could block such supersonic attacks if they didn't see them coming. Jean unsheathed his sword only to avoid any critical damage and prepare for the next series of movements. A sharp, thread-like beam of light grazed Jin's left cheek. It cut a few strands of hair and drew blood from his flesh. Fortunately, Dante was safe. He landed somewhere near Tuyen and Phainia. You just dodged that? Seems like you have some skills to back up your claims after all. Crack. Following her soft words, a line passed through the place where Jean had been standing. The line was straight and narrow, as if someone had drawn it with a ruler. It ran through the entire house. 5 of those lines appeared in an instant. Octavia followed immediately after Jean dodged the first attack, but none of them were aimed at Jean. Her intention was to destroy anything he could hide. In other words, she wanted to bring down the whole house. The gigantic vacation house was sliced like butter. Cracks formed by the beam widened, sending rocks and various materials through the gaps. Debris flew everywhere in the collapsing building, like popcorn in a kettle. Jean and the dragons hurried to cast shield barriers against the debris. No, the dragons had already cast their shield barriers to protect Baradin and Dante. They were no longer the adorable dragons chattering and cleaning the house. Their gazes were cold and devoid of emotion. In fact, the dragons even prevented Baradin from approaching Jean. Dante couldn't break through the dragon's shield barrier either. When Octavia appeared, the dragons understood that Baradin and Dante would die for sure if they left their shields. Similarly, Octavia felt more at ease using all her power to capture Jean because the dragons were present. As Jean had predicted, Octavia and her followers, the specters, didn't care whether they blew up the entire island or not. This was definitely no joke. Chills ran down Jin's neck as he saw the countless debris shatter upon contact with the shield barriers. It had been a long time since he felt such a crisis. However, Jean directed the following words to Dante and Baradin, who were desperately trying to leave the dragon's shield barrier. It's impossible for them to capture me. I'll see you later. The entire house collapsed. It caused a dark cloud of dust and blocked their view. Beat him half to death and bring him to me. The specters raised their staves immediately after Octavia gave her order. Then the red sky swirled, and countless mana particles rained down. It was as if blood rained from the sky. The mana particles turned into blades and chains as they fell toward Jean. Jean couldn't do anything against that spell. It was a chain spell created by 9 and 10-star magicians. The red mana rained fiercely, sending shivers down his spine. The power was so immense that he couldn't even think of reflecting it with the inverted sky as he did against the Zippel magicians in the Holy Kingdom. Even with his lightning energy and shadow energy, he couldn't do anything. The power gap was too wide. If Jean hadn't anticipated this and hadn't planned any countermeasures, he would undoubtedly be finished this time. They're quite late. Jean swiftly dodged the red chains and swords. It had been a long time since Jean felt such terrible tearing sensations in his hand. At most 10 times. In fact, blocking this attack 10 times was a miracle in itself. They had to arrive before he exhausted himself. His own guardian dragons were on their way, just as Tuyen and Phainia were here to protect Baradin and Dante at this moment. 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. His physical strength and aura diminished greatly each time he blocked the attacks of the red mana. It was killing him, but the Spectre magicians were equally shocked. This 18-year-old provisional flag-bearer of Runcandle was constantly blocking their chain spell. The island was already crumbling. Every time Jean severed the red mana, it fell onto the island, causing a huge piece of land to shake and tremble. Of course, if the Spectres didn't need to capture him alive, this battle would have ended long ago. Jean was walking on thin ice every time he stopped the attack. But that, in itself, was insulting to the specters. 7, 8, 9. Jean coughed up blood and dropped to one knee. The backlash of aura spread throughout his body. He could barely wield his sword anymore. But Jean had a slight smile on his face. When he struck against the 9th attack of red mana, he saw a huge dark hole appear in the middle of the sky. Guardian dragons. Not in singular. He said it right. They were guardian dragons. Baradin wasn't the only one privileged to receive the protection of 2 guardian dragons. The last 2 dark dragons remaining in the human world emerged from the dark hole, piercing through the exclusion zone formed by the specters. Watch as the champions of humanity plunge into the red abyss to capture a little boy. The previous generations of specters will rise from their graves in shame. It was Misha. Her voice resonated. The swords and chains of the chain spell, Red Abyss, immediately stopped pursuing Jean. It wasn't the specters who halted the spell. It was the shadow energy. The shadows blending with the red mana were overpowering the Red Abyss. It was the power of Misha. Jean heard Muraken's voice. "Kid, how did it go? This time it was really close, huh? How else were we going to teach you to swim, if not in moments like this?" He was turning the red sky into darkness. Whirlwinds of various sizes swirled as he flapped his wings, just like when he crushed the dark magic guild. It was as if a dark sea had unfolded where the sky should have been. Meanwhile, Jean pondered Muraken's greeting. How was he supposed to learn to swim? Don't tell me that crazy dragon intentionally arrived late. Actually, Muraken and Misha were delayed due to the strong exclusion zones set up by the specters. But Jean would never find out the truth. Cruer. Muraken breathed down toward the ground before the specters could even form their formation. The specters had cast a gigantic chain spell like the Red Abyss and were now erecting shield barriers. But they remained calm and serene. None of them showed the slightest sign of retreat. Octavia's lightning bolts shot up toward the sky before Muraken's breath could hit the barriers. Surprisingly, the lightning cut through the breath in half and shot toward Muraken's neck. The dragon returned the lightning with his wings instead of dodging it. Misha descended slowly toward Jean while holding the Red Abyss. Muraken and Misha. I didn't expect to encounter the legendary dark dragons here. So Jean Runcandle was your contractor after all. How is the wound Cadden inflicted on you? Is it healed? Octavia was a monster in her own right. She didn't even flinch when the dark dragons looked down at her from the sky. Magician, if you ever make it out alive, tell Cadden that the King of the Skies has returned. Not a difficult request. And that the King of the World will change too. Do you really think the Runcandle clan can defeat us for the throne of the world? It seems you've forgotten the lesson your previous contractor left you 1,000 years ago. Muraken's lips moved in response. But it wasn't out of anger or humiliation. He scoffed. It was the kind of mockery that supernatural beings often hurled at those terribly foolish humans out of genuine amusement. Who said the Runcandle clan would become the kings of the world? I was referring to my contractor. Fools, keep babbling. Completely unaware that today was your last chance to change the future. It won't be the Runcandle clan. That will bring down the Zipples to become the kings of the world. It will be Jean Runcandle. For some reason, Octavia couldn't mock this ridiculously exaggerated claim. She remained calm when facing the 2 dragons, but now, for some reason, she felt as if she had a big fishbone stuck in her throat. But why? It was her intuition. Not the senses of a 10-star magician, but the ordinary premonition that all humans feel from time to time. This ominous yet powerful sensation made Octavia feel distress. Very well. If the great dark dragon deviates from his path to warn us, there's no need to think too much about it. Specters, there's no need to capture him alive. Kill Jean Runcandle.